Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the person you fought the entire world to marry has been secretly plotting against you. Not a loud, messy public scandal, but a chilling, methodical, and invisible coup orchestrated right under your own roof. King Charles has completely and ruthlessly frozen Camilla out of his existence, and the reason is absolutely staggering. It didn't happen gradually. It was an overnight execution of her power, triggered by a highly classified physical dossier that Prince William personally compiled and hand-delivered to his father in the dead of night. Before we pull back the curtain on this unprecedented royal crisis, I want to respectfully ask you to subscribe to Regalvora. If you appreciate unfiltered truth and want to understand the real dynamics behind palace walls, hitting that subscribe button means the world to us. Thank you for being here. Now, let us uncover how a meticulously planned betrayal was finally dragged into the light. This explosive report did not just materialize out of thin air. For agonizing months, Prince William had been quietly watching from the shadows. He had been gathering testimonies, speaking with terrified palace staff, and documenting a deeply sinister pattern of behavior that he knew his father desperately needed to see. The fact that William felt compelled to physically write this down and deliver it in secret tells you everything. This wasn't a casual family dispute. This was a grave, monumental crisis, and he had the undeniable evidence to prove it. The delivery itself is like a scene from a psychological thriller. It was 9:30 at night at Buckingham Palace. King Charles had dismissed his staff and was completely alone in his private study. Suddenly, one of his most fiercely trusted aides entered, carrying a thick manila envelope sealed with William's personal wax crest. This was a confidential, eyes-only document. The aide explained that the Prince of Wales had demanded private delivery and then immediately withdrew. You have to imagine the profound dread settling into the king's chest. His eldest son, the heir to the throne, does not send sealed dossiers in the middle of the night without a devastating reason. When Charles broke that seal and began reading the substantial multi-page report, his entire reality began to fracture. The document explicitly detailed what Camilla had been doing in the dark corners of the palace, how she was operating, and the alarming patterns William had meticulously tracked. William's introduction was heavy with sorrow. He wrote about the agonizing conflict between his loyalty to his family and his ultimate duty to the crown. He made it completely clear that every single terrifying claim was verified by multiple independent sources. He wasn't asking his father to just take his word for it. He was practically begging the king to look at the evidence and verify it himself. And that is exactly what Charles did. As the king read on, the horror deepened. The report described a hostile takeover happening right beneath his nose. Small, seemingly innocent incidents suddenly painted a picture of calculated sabotage. The report revealed that 3 months prior, a deeply loyal household manager with 20 years of impeccable service had suddenly begged for a transfer to a minor, irrelevant role. When William investigated, he discovered that Camilla had dragged this manager into a private meeting, viciously questioning their loyalty and threatening their livelihood if they didn't submit entirely to her new vision. But it wasn't just one incident. William documented a terrifying pattern. Camilla was systematically driving out veteran palace employees people with decades of invaluable institutional knowledge and replacing them with individuals who possessed zero traditional experience. These new hires shared only one defining trait: blind, unquestioning obedience to Camilla alone. She was building an impenetrable inner circle, an absolute shadow government operating out of her private apartments while the king was busy elsewhere. The sheer audacity of her actions is breathtaking. Decisions that required senior royal consultation were suddenly being routed through Camilla's informal, hidden channels. The report proved she was making wildly inappropriate claims about her own authority, actually telling staff members that her personal wishes demanded the exact same respect as direct, official orders from the king himself. That is not how a queen consort operates. That is the blatant language of a tyrannical power grab. Furthermore, the dossier exposed deeply concerning financial irregularities. Budget allocations for Camilla's personal office had violently spiked without any normal approval processes. When financial administrators dared to ask questions, her newly installed loyalists provided vague, evasive answers. But the ultimate betrayal was her manipulation of the king himself. Trusted advisors reported that their vital access to Charles was being choked off. Camilla was intercepting crucial communications, deciding what the king was allowed to see, effectively blinding the monarch and controlling his perception of reality. Sitting alone in his study at midnight, King Charles faced a soul-crushing revelation. The woman he had defended against the entire globe was secretly undermining the very institution they were sworn to serve. But Charles did not react with a violent outburst. Instead, in a display of terrifying composure, he spent the early morning hours pulling out his own deeply personal daily journals. He ruthlessly cross-referenced every single claim in William's report with his own private records. For every terrifying incident William documented, Charles found a corresponding memory. He remembered the moments Camilla had smoothly volunteered to manage certain tasks, framing it as a loving wife easing his heavy burden. In reality, she was systematically isolating him. He reviewed financial logs and security records, and the agonizing truth became impossible to deny. Camilla was meticulously constructing a parallel empire, answering only to her. He had confused his profound love and blind trust with healthy confidence, allowing a parasite to grow within the heart of the monarchy. When the sun rose the next morning, the marriage was effectively dead. Charles walked into the breakfast room, finding Camilla waiting with her tea. Instead of his customary affectionate kiss, he offered a chillingly brief nod and sat at the absolute farthest end of the table. When she attempted light conversation, she was met with a wall of freezing, impenetrable silence. Charles finished his meal rapidly and departed, leaving her completely alone in the echoing room. She had absolutely no idea that this cold reception was the beginning of her permanent, inescapable exile. Within hours, the king's silent wrath materialized. He ordered his private secretary to sever their travel arrangements. He permanently canceled their intimate evening briefings, entirely cutting her off from the flow of palace intelligence. Without a word of discussion, Charles ordered his personal belongings stripped from their shared private apartments, relocating himself to a completely separate, heavily guarded wing of the palace. The physical separation was just the beginning. The king systematically dismantled her shadow empire with ruthless precision. He stripped her name from powerful charitable foundations they had co-chaired, handing her authority over to other family members. He permanently excluded her from all future royal tour planning, deliberately replacing her input with the trusted, loyal counsel of Prince William. The palace staff, immediately sensing the catastrophic shift in power, abandoned her. Administrators who once begged for her favor now directed every single question straight to the king. The loyalist staff Camilla had so carefully planted were aggressively demoted, stripped of their duties until they were forced to resign in sheer humiliation. Camilla was drowning in a sea of isolation. Desperate and terrified, she sent heartfelt, pleading letters to Charles, begging for a private dinner, begging for an explanation. The king's response was a masterpiece of absolute devastation. It arrived days later as a single, cold, typed paragraph stating he would only communicate through official secretaries. He treated the woman he once loved with the sterile, uncompromising distance of a disgraced employee. She found herself trapped in a psychological nightmare. She maintained the glittering title, she wore the spectacular jewels for the flashing cameras, but behind closed doors, she was a ghost. She suffered the agonizing physical toll of her total isolation, crippling anxiety, sleepless nights, and the suffocating realization that every single person in the palace knew she had been cast out. She had no real power without the king's favor, and he had chosen to entirely erase her influence. Charles had implemented ironclad protocols. No department head could make a single change without the king's personal, written authorization. He formed a powerful inner advisory council prominently featuring Prince William, locking Camilla completely out of the very institution she had tried to control. The father and son forged an unbreakable, unified front, determined to protect the crown at any cost. Today, Camilla is forced to endure a humiliating, hollow existence. She must smile dutifully for the public, standing paces behind a husband who refuses to look at her, only to return every single night to a cold, silent room. The systematic nature of her betrayal left King Charles with absolutely no other choice. Prince William's midnight report did not create this tragedy. It merely exposed the monster hiding in the shadows. And now, the woman who tried to steal the ultimate power of the monarchy has been condemned to a life of beautiful, agonizing invisibility.